Hello and welcome to another Midas video for hotel and hospitality professionals looking to learn and develop new skills. In this video, we're going to give you a quick run through of an incredibly useful model from neuroscience that explains how our unconscious reaction to threats and rewards can impact our performance, and how understanding and consciously managing our responses can help us to be more resilient and perform more effectively, and help others to do so too. So let's get started with the neuroscience bit. The human brain is an immensely complex organ that we're only just scratching the surface of in terms of understanding it. But modern science has revealed more in the last 20 years or so than we've ever been able to discover. New technologies such as MRI or EEG scanning allow researchers to track brain activities from the inside and see a picture of the brain at work, and help them to understand how our brain reacts to a particular stimulus. Talking of stimulus, our brain reaction is really quite simple. In fact, technically, it's primitive, connecting us with our ancient past. Imagine a choice between running away from this very scary lion or towards this very delicious cupcake. You wouldn't even have to think about it. Already we can see that some of our responses and behaviours are incredibly predictable, and as such, it means we can plan, prepare, and adjust where needed. It's a simple matter of survival. And with other threats, being adaptive in this way is key to resilience. It's not just physical threats that we react to in this way. Two researchers called Lieberman and Eisenberger discovered the brain actually treats social threats and rewards with the same intensity as physical threats and rewards. Think about that for a moment. Your brain and mine simply doesn't distinguish a difference between the physical lion that might eat you for dinner and having to give an after-dinner speech to a large number of people. For many, in fact, the thought of presenting to a full room of people would strike as much, if not more, fear into them than the lion. Now, obviously, this is an extreme example, but the fact of the matter is that we encounter countless examples of social threats every day. And guess what? Another useful neuroscience finding by Elliott in 2008 found that our capacity to make decisions, solve problems, and collaborate with others is massively reduced by a threat response and increased under a reward response. Clearly, this is of great importance right now. Whilst we are facing a once-in-a-generation challenge, it's important that we are resilient, firing on all cylinders, and not inhibited by these fears. Of course, the irony is that those same challenges can often create those pesky threat responses. That brings us nicely on to the SCARF model and the work of David Rock. Now, David Rock was the first person to combine neuroscience research with the world of work to create the concept of neuro leadership. He is the director of the Neuro Leadership Institute, the author of the business bestseller Your Brain at Work, as well as Quiet Leadership and the textbook Coaching with the Brain in Mind. The SCARF model highlights 5 domains of human social experience. In other words, these domains are physical locations in our brain that activate in response to perceived or actual threats or rewards. Let's look at them one by one. So the first is status. And status is ingrained into the human social dynamic in every civilization and culture on the planet. It's huge. In material terms, think classes, wealth, cars, job hierarchies. How many people avoid ordering the cheapest bottle of wine in a restaurant just purely because they don't want to be judged? Instinctively, we know this, which is why we assign VIP status to certain guests, upgrade them, and make sure we remember their preferences. How important is it for you to receive a pay increase and or job promotion? See, status is everywhere. And it's not just the material things that constitute status. It also includes things like how we measure ourselves against others, feel successful, inclusion, feeling significant, belonging to a tribe, and how we fit in. Even a perceived threat can create an enormous threat response, and rewards for status are equally powerful. Things like titles, medals, certificates, praise, and recognition, as well as our inner response to our self-value. Just knowing that we have achieved something for ourselves, feel proud, or simply that we matter. The second is certainty, a survival fundamental. Imagine going to bed at night and not being certain that the sun would rise the next day. How the hell would you be able to sleep? Certainly, in that context, it's primeval. Your brain loves certainty. It actively looks for patterns, for familiar things, routines, and once it finds certainty, it can relax, settle down, and do more important and complicated things. If it can't find certainty, sometimes it will make things up. It's how optical illusions and even some magic tricks work. Lack of certainty is closely related to some forms of anxiety, like when you leave the house and can't remember for sure if you turn the hair straight and there's all the hob off. What if they catch fire? Certainty is in particular short supply at the moment. Is your job safe? Is your health safe? What will happen to that holiday you've booked? All of these have the potential to generate either a threat response or a reward response, depending on the level of certainty. Think how much happier you are when you're in absolutely no doubt something positive is going to go ahead and you can look forward to it. Looking forward to something creates a nice, lovely pool of dopamine in our reward circuitry, whereas uncertainty about the future has the opposite effect. The third domain is autonomy. Autonomy is to do with our sense of control, or actual control over events in our lives. Think about the times when you feel like you're not in control. It's very troubling. And of course, these domains do not activate individually, so you could be uncertain about your status and get a double dose of threat response. The stress and anxiety of not being able to make decisions and plan is very current right now. Coronavirus has wreaked havoc into our lives and on a micro and macro scale, affecting us globally and day to day on a very personal level. With all the restrictions and rules that there are in place, we've lost a lot of autonomy. We are simply not allowed to do things that we did before. What about in the context of our guests? We're telling them what they can and can't do, even at booking stage, when this is the complete opposite of what hospitality is all about. Autonomy and a sense of agency with our own lives is very easily threatened, because being helpless could be life-threatening in some situations. That line could easily, you remember? The fourth domain is relatedness. Relatedness is all about our interpersonal relationships, trust, and just being with other people. The reward circuitry of relatedness leads us to collaborate and form social groups, something that is common in many animal groups as well as in humans. Again, it's primal in origin, so understandably powerful. Research studies have proven over and over again that positive relationships are vital for health and well-being, even having influence on our longevity. Even smiling at someone increases your happy brain chemicals, and the happy ones, like endorphins and oxytocin, are the ones you want more of. Responses of relatedness result in loneliness, fears of rejection, and production of stress chemicals that are quite literally toxic. Relatedness in this COVID crisis has taken a bit of a beating, with our relationships with friends and family, our teams and colleagues, and all of our guests significantly compromised. Even those people you can see, you can't hug, kiss, shake hands with, or get physically close with in any way. Social distancing is unnatural and hard to maintain in some circumstances. If human beings wanted to keep a distance, they'd have never invented travel and the various ways of meeting up. Hospitality thrives on relatedness, and our whole profession is based on its reward structures in creating feelings and memories of warmth, affection, and emotional safety. The fifth and final domain is fairness. The brain is very alert about fairness because it's about distribution of resources and distributive justice. That's why there is a domain for it, and it gets activated by perceived threat or reward. It's a survival thing. If I'm not going to get my fair share, then I might not survive. It's pretty primitive, really, as all of the domains are. When something seems unfair, it triggers intense emotions and a strong threat response. On the other hand, results from research have shown that increasing the perception of fairness in the workplace promotes satisfaction and well-being. Whilst we're all in this together, there is very little that is fair about our current situation. Many of us have been affected disproportionately, and that is unfair. It is easy to feel resentful and envious of those who seem to be faring better. However, conquering these feelings is key to bouncing back and developing resilience. So what? What can you do with all this? How does a quick tour of the SCARF model help you develop resilience? Well, as Plato is reported to have said, reality is created by the mind. We can change our reality by changing our mind. Our mind is a jumble of things, including our feelings. Feelings are how we label our emotional responses to various threat and reward stimuli. Although they can feel pretty real, they aren't really. They're just responses. And whilst we can't always control what happens externally, we do have a great deal of control over our mindset and our responses. This control is a way of developing resilience. Resilience isn't something that we have or we don't have, because that wouldn't be fair. It's something that we can all develop and strengthen, and the key to being able to do that is to understand some of our own responses to threats. To develop your resilience, try practicing these simple things. Be mindful. When you feel something strongly, it's likely to be triggered by a threat reaction, so use what you know now. Can you pause and think before acting or reacting? Take a slow breathe in and out 3 or 4 times and just give yourself some space. Identify your feelings, but don't identify with them. Keep the feelings separate and treat it as information. It's telling you something or trying to tell you something. What is the threat causing that feeling? Think and say, I'm feeling anxious, rather than I am anxious. You are not your feelings, and your feelings do not define you. Writing them down and articulating them can also help separate them and get them under control. Reframe. Putting a different frame on a picture changes the look of that picture dramatically. In the same way, reframing a situation can change the way we see or perceive it. By changing the way you perceive it, you're changing the feelings and emotions that are produced. Examining it from different angles, looking at what you might be missing, and then finding the positive element or even the humour will help you enormously. Finding gratitude in situations will also be good for well-being. The words we use create the world we inhabit. Practice talking, even internally, in a more positive way. Our constant mantra of "it's going to be a disaster" is likely to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. Avoid absolutes or generalizations, saying or even thinking things like "it always happens to me every time" or "everyone else." These aspects of our thinking and expression are rigid, whereas resilience is all about being flexible. Like the difference between concrete and rubber, concrete will never bounce back. Lastly, let it go. Don't waste any time trying to control things outside your influence, and don't waste your energy in harboring resentment. As the Dalai Lama once said, if a problem is fixable, and if a situation is such that you can do something about it, then there's no need to worry. If it's not fixable, then there's no help in worrying. There is no benefit of worrying whatsoever, or in other words, don't sweat the small stuff.